All right, so I would love to talk about integrating Sanity Studio V3 into SvelteKit. So essentially, want to get them to play nicely, and it took me a while and to figure this out, and to really develop a workflow that I liked. So I want to talk about that. A little bit about me. Most people know me as the guy who co-founded Heat, which is like a community for music producers. So what we do is we teach music producers how to sell music online. We have several courses for that. I also created cardpops.com, which is a WordPress plugin for e-commerce store owners. I've been developing since 2017. Kind of started with no code because I was doing marketing, and you have like tracking scripts and whatnot. So sometimes I had to figure out how to use JavaScript, and I had no idea. So I started, hiring people on, Upwork and stuff like that to do stuff for me. It was really expensive, and at some point I just started tinkering, and I kind of fell in love with, I guess, like tinkering, and I got stuck in the whole development rabbit hole. I picked up PHP, and that's when I started building carpops.com. And I was doing like basic CSS and JavaScript and all of that stuff. And then eventually I picked up a little bit of TypeScript, and I started creating like web apps in 2019. It's a fun story actually, because it started with me doing NFTs and the whole Web3 thing, and I was like, why not create an app that tracks your NFT portfolio? So I kind of started liking the idea, and I couldn't get it out of my head. So I was like, let's create a web app that does that thing for me and sort of scratch my own itch. So I started looking into, I knew about React and I sort of knew about Vue, so I started looking into them. And me coming from PHP, I had no idea. So I looked into React, and it felt so damn daunting to me. It felt like a total foreign language, even with the little bit of JavaScript that I knew. So I started looking at Vue, and it made much more sense coming from the PHP world, where you'll have your script tag at the top and then your HTML at the bottom. And then I sort of started creating with it, and I spent like 6 months developing this web app that a couple of people used, and I eventually I shut it down like a year or so ago, because it just it didn't work out. But I also didn't really feel like the whole Web3 thing was like the path for me to pursue. But what I later realized, that those 6 months that I wasted were just a really really just a course on development, and how I need to go about building web apps. It was like this huge side project for me. So that's how I got really into creating web apps. And now I'm just like super pumped to create things. And I stumble upon things such as Sanity. So after Vue, I was like, okay, what's next? And I discovered Svelte. And man, I love Svelte. It just feels like home for me, because like React feels a bit boilerplatey to me. I can write React, it's fine. And Vue still kind of feels boilerplatey to me, and you need to install separate state management packages such as Vuex or Pinya, or however you pronounce that. And then with Svelte, there's like built-in state management, and I can sort of tinker and do that all within that same framework. So I really started to dig into Svelte and started building tiny projects with it. And then one of the projects that rolled out of it was like this project called NeoTokyo.fm, which is like this online radio station, because I wanted to have music during when I was developing, and then I wanted to sort of be ambient, but I also wanted to be more like more up tempo, like cyberpunk, chill wave, whatever the whole genre is. Personally, I'm really into hip hop and R&B, but when I'm developing, I like to listen to sort of like this genre. It just helps me focus. So I created this and then use Sanity in the backend. So this is like built on top of the YouTube embed API. So basically, you can search for YouTube you can search for YouTube videos and then add them to a specific station, and then you can switch stations within the app, and then listen to the music. And when that video in the back end ends, or like behind the front end ends, it will just start the new track and so on. It's sort of like an endless loop, but this really helps me focus. And it got some traction, and it had a couple thousand page views within the first week, and people really liked it. I also use Sanity for my own business, because we sell these music samples online, and this is like a standard Shopify theme, just an out of the box theme. But I wanted to create a way for people to sort of preview what's inside the product, and it's audio. So this kind of made more sense to me than create like hundreds of SoundCloud embeds and sort of put them on the page. I mean, having one at the top is fine to preview the whole thing, but like have each separate audio track. There wasn't anything in the Shopify app store that I could use, so I decided to, why not create one section that has a specific ID and just mount a Svelte app just onto that section, and then use Sanity in the to sort of get the tracks for that specific Shopify slug. And I'm just using the official Sanity plugin that's in the Shopify App Store that sort of syncs your products. And then, someone who works for me, they just come in and they add the tracks in Sanity, and it just works perfect. And it's really this tiny section, but it's really important for our e-commerce business to work well. And I created many more projects with Sanity, but I guess like it's too much to dive in here right now. However, I feel like there's still a lot of work that needs to be done for the Svelte ecosystem within Sanity specifically. I do feel like Sanity v3 is really going to change the game, because the boilerplate just decreased a lot. It's going to be independent of of the kind of like the compiler that you use. So I feel like there's a lot that we can do here, and with this talk, I wanted to quickly dive into my thoughts and how I sort of figured this out for my projects. So I'm going to exit this real quick, and I kind of wrote it all in a blog post, because I feel like that sort of makes it easier to sort of reference this later on as well. So first thing that was on my list and that I really wanted to get done and that I got curious about is, how can I embed the new studio inside my SvelteKit app? And I guess like the first thing that I bumped into, because when I read the official announcement, I was like, oh, cool. So it's bundle agnostic, and you can use it in any framework. And all you need to do is kind of import this whole Skypack thing. And I started messing around with it, and I was like, I can't get it to work. And it's throwing me an error. So I was doing this whole, maybe I can, create a Svelte component that sort of renders a React component. And I didn't really, thought about creating I didn't really thought about checking out the package and see if there's an actual function inside of the v3 dev preview that I can use to render it. So I started, I went down this whole rabbit hole for nothing, because I sort of thought about it in way too hard, but eventually I figured it out, and I got it to work. So I'll open up my VS Code here. And really, this was like ridiculously simple, but I just wanted to show it for the guys and girls and whoever are using, SvelteKit. All really takes is to mount the studio is to create a route folder that's called studio, or whatever you feel like you want to have there. And then you need to create another folder that's a catch-all folder. So basically everything that will be /studio/ whatever will be cached, so that the studio can catch up with that specific route and show you the content that's needed there. So all I did was I created my Sanity config as per the new beta docs. So this holds all of my Sanity config essentially. And as you can see, it's pretty small. I feel like it's already such a difference compared with the other, with the v2. I obviously, this isn't really a big project or anything like that, but all it really takes is, this kind of like config, which I really like, to do everything in here. And I keep all of my Sanity config inside this like library folder, and it just like, it's all in here. I really like that. So the next thing I did is I created a component called Sanity Studio, which I can open here. And I'm importing the render studio function and the create config from Sanity. And the version that I have installed right now is the dev preview 22. And what we need to do is we need to declare a variable, and this can be anything really, that we bind to a div. And when the component mounts, we can check whether that div exists, and then we can mount Sanity to it. And it looks like this. So I created a little demo app here. And if I go to /studio, for some reason, I don't have it added to my thingy. Let's try that again. All right, yeah, so there it is. And as you can see, it mounts just fine. I can access any post that I want, and everything works as expected. And for some reason, this took me a long time to figure out, because I guess like the official announcement from the blog post kind of sort of catch me off guard. I don't know if it was this post, but yeah, at some point I figured it out, and it's actually really easy. So I created this blog post for anyone who really wants to, follow along and embed this into their SvelteKit app as well. I think there's a lot of like reasons why you should too. If you're running a small project or doing anything client related, there's like no need for a mono repo or a turbo repo. You can just have it all inside of this app and sort of manage everything within this same code base. And I really like that workflow personally. All right, so the next thing that I wanted to, and this repo is available, by the way. You can just go to my website, chrisjayden.com, and you can pick it up right here. And the next thing I wanted to dive into is live content previews. And this actually took me a fair bit to figure out. I kind of explained it here at the start. You can have your changes in real time in your SvelteKit app. So the reason why it took me a bit to figure this out is that Sanity has a Next.js toolkit, which is like built for Next.js. It's not SvelteKit stuff, obviously. So I had to sort of go through this code base to figure out how to get the whole live preview thing to work. And I guess like in this talk, I sort of wanted to dive into how I got this to work. And of course, you can reread this whole thing. It's actually not that hard to implement, but it takes some time to set up. You can of course clone the repo and you can play with it. It's also, you can play with this demo online as well. It should be online too. I can drop it in the chat later on. Let me see. Yeah, so the first challenge I ran into was that SvelteKit, unlike Next.js, doesn't have like a preview mode. And a preview mode in Next.js is really a way for, I guess, like CMSs to, have a way to preview content. And I feel like it has to do, in Next.js at least, it has to do with cookies and a bunch of other stuff that they're doing in like the Next.js code base, like their internal code. And I started looking for something like this in SvelteKit, but I couldn't really, find it. Not many people are talking about this because I feel like, the SvelteKit ecosystem is still, it's still sort of small. The whole React ecosystem is just so much bigger. And yeah, the second challenge was that Sanity conveniently provides a Next.js toolkit, but I couldn't really find anything for SvelteKit. So what we need to do is we need to create the preview mode. And really what this is like, let me grab the example. When you click on preview right here, it should look up that same post on the live side or your development on your local host. It doesn't really matter, but it needs to look up that post and then sort of injects the draft of that post inside the app. So if I click preview right here, you can see it pops up the preview just like that, and I can open the side by side, head over to the editor, and I can change this to whatever, and it it updates on the fly, and you can sort of make changes in real time before hitting publish, and that's really what we want. And this whole Next.js toolkit makes that super convenient to do. So what I had to do is I had to create a preview mode where you can sort of set a specific preview cookie, and then the app knows like, hey, this person is previewing. Let's inject some other stuff that's coming from the post that we're previewing right now. And I'm actually going to dive into the code base again, and I'm going to sort of walk you through how this works, because explaining all the code in this talk is going to take too much time. I would suggest to sort of read through the blog post and try it out, or clone the repo and publish it on Vercel. So what happens is we have this API route with a preview endpoint. And basically what happens inside of Sanity, when you click on the preview panel, it will open up this route and it will check if it has a specific secret. If the secrets don't match, we throw an error. And then we continue and we check if the post in this case is, if the type in this case is a post, and we will fetch that specific post. If we get a response, we can use that slug to redirect to the preview in this case. So after that, if that person is previewing, we'll set a cookie, and that sort of hints at our app like, hey, this person is previewing right now. And then inside of our posts, we have a sort of a server, and this runs before the post page gets mounted. So if we have our app right here, and I click on any of these posts, the server will first run, get the data, and then show it to the client. So what we do here is we can check if we have the preview mode cookie, and we then get a specific Sanity client to fetch our content. And that client sort of depends on whether we are previewing right now. So if we are previewing, then we can fetch with more credentials. We can sort of fetch the draft, and if we're not, we'll just fetch the normal post. So this runs before the page gets sent to the client. And then on the client, we sort of have this hook, which is modeled after the Next.js toolkit that Sanity built. But it's basically turned into a SvelteKit store that sort of does the same functionality. But basically, this takes care of handling all the data that sort of comes in, and it checks whether it's in preview mode or not. And this is actually really cool because you can do things like this bar at the top. You can pull the current user that's logged into Sanity. You can pull that with an API call, and then you can just greet them and say like, "Hey, what's up? This page is a draft," and you can have them exit, because we also have a route that's called exit preview, and all this is doing is it will just clear the preview cookie again. This is actually very similar to the new Next.js app that was released by Sanity with the new Sanity Studio v3. I sort of model it to my liking. So right now, the hook that takes care of previewing, I call it the Create Preview subscription store. I believe inside the Next.js package, this is called. Uh, this hook is called Create something. Create Preview subscription hook. I sort of took that approach and made it its Svelte store. So right now this is inside of this code base. But if there's enough demand from like the Sanity community and people who are using Svelte, then we can look at making this a Svelte toolkit for Sanity, because I feel like it would make things a lot easier because there's quite a lot going on here. And again, I explained this in this whole post. It took a lot of time to write this all down. So if you're interested and you're using SvelteKit, I would suggest to, go through this post and sort of get an idea of how this whole previewing content works, because it unlocked a lot for my team, that they're able to preview the content before they hit publish. Because I didn't use the preview side-by-side preview before, and people started clicking publish when just to sort of look at the changes, but they didn't realize it would start a new build. It would post something on social media, and all of that stuff, and it was just chaos. So this sort of change and setup really helped me to take things to the next level. So yeah, that was really my talk on getting Sanity to play really nice with SvelteKit. I wish I had more time to really dive into the code, because I love to dive into the nitty gritty of things. But I feel like that's for another time. And yeah, you can check out chrisjayden.com. I have the repo up here as well, so you can check it out. And yeah, until next time.
Awesome. That was great stuff.
That was fantastic.
That was a lot.
I found the blog post and I shared it in the Slack channel, so everyone has that. We've been following along. But Knut says something at the very end that I thought was very good to like pass on to you. But this is super valuable for anyone who builds with this stack. You seem to do a lot of work that wasn't there. So I was wondering, so there seemed to be a lot of like roadblocks that you hit that you figured out and you just kind of like worked your way around. What was the hardest one in your opinion? And did you find others online that were building with this stack that you could like get support from, or was it all just you?
Well, I guess like I'm not really the guy who posts questions on Stack Overflow. I'm the guy who stays up until 4 a.m. to figure something out. But I'm also the type of guy who thinks about certain problems like way too hard. And in reality, it's much simpler than that. At the start of this talk, I talked about how I got stuck embedding the new studio, like the V3, inside my Svelte app, because I kind of thought way too hard about the whole problem, and it was actually much simpler than that. All it took was one function, but I didn't really care to take a look at whether that function exists. So I got stuck there. I got stuck at like figuring out the whole preview mode in Next.js, because I looked at the Next.js internals and I was like, my head, I cannot really, look at all this code and make sense of what Next.js is doing behind the scenes with the whole preview mode. But then I figured out like it's just setting a cookie. So I was like, all right, I can do this. And that got me more convinced. And then I sort of ended up on this. But during this whole thing, like this whole search online, I couldn't really find a lot of people doing the same thing. So I guess like it makes sense to sort of publish this online, and hopefully it helps other people too.
Yeah, it's really, really awesome that you wrote it all down, because a lot of people, well, some people, they just, figure it out and they're, I got my repo up and I got my project running and that's all good. But for you to like write it out in a blog post, that's going to help a lot of people. We'll definitely put it, because this will all live on YouTube. We'll put the link to that blog post as a description so that people can find it easily. There's a lot of love in the chat, so definitely go look at the chat for this Svelte Insanity stuff that you've done. We're very impressed. There are no other questions from me or from none that I see here. Just a lot of like, this is really awesome. You did great work. Lo, do you have anything else to share?
No, just that was fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, I was just checking at the comments inside of Slack and see what people had to say. Yeah. Felicia said, "Whoa, big up for his work on Sanity." Well, I really appreciate it. Yeah, these comments are heartfelt. I like this community a lot.
Yeah, you did a fantastic job, and this is your first talk, right?
Yeah, I guess like this is my first dev talk ever.
You rocked it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, Chris. That was an amazing talk, amazing demo. And you all can find Chris on Twitter. Lo will be sharing that handle in the chat, but you can all find Chris there. And if you have more questions, but you will find the video uploaded very soon and that blog post as well if you missed it. But yeah, thank you so much, Chris, and we will see you around.
Thank you for having me. All right.
Yeah. Bye.
Cheers.